Hello Internet, welcome to another game development tutorial. In this video, I will show you how to make a game like Flappy Bird. Actually, a simple version of Flappy Bird. The game is actually running really slow because I'm using the screen recording software, and without the screen recording software, the game would actually work perfectly. So first, let's go ahead and make a copy of the Phaser framework, and I'm going to rename it as Flappy Tutorial. Just like we did in our previous tutorial for our basic game. If you haven't watched that tutorial, which is Introduction to Game Development in HTML5, I highly recommend you go ahead and watch that first and then come back. I'll go inside our game folder and I'm going to create the assets folder in here. If you remember from the previous tutorial, assets folder will contain all the game assets. So I'm gonna paste a image of a character into this folder. Now it's coding time. Go ahead and open up the game folder in the brackets editor and open up main.js and index.html file. So first I'm going to create a variable for storing the sprite of our character. I'm going to name it as Flappy. Then I'm going to load the image of the bird in the preload function. And then I'm going to create the bird onto the stage inside the create function. After creating the bird, the sprite of the bird actually gets stored inside this variable Flappy, which we created earlier. I've explained about these functions in the previous tutorial, so I'm not going to explain it again in this tutorial. So now if you test the game, you can see something like this. You can see that the bird is being created at the center of the stage and the coordinates 200 and 300. Now let's go ahead and give it a nice background color. So to change the background color of the game, you can use the statement game.stage.backgroundColor equal to the code of the color. This actually is the code of the color, and you can find this code of the color from tools like Photoshop, or simply Google it and you will be able to find the code of any color you want. Now if we test the game, we can see that the background actually changed. So next, let's get into the game logic. The first thing we want to do is we actually want the bird to fall down when the game starts. To do that, all we have to do is just to enable gravity for the bird. And for enabling gravity, first you have to use the physics system provided by Phaser. So inside the create function, first let's go ahead and set up the physics. So this is a function used for setting up physics in a game. Now once you've done that, go ahead and enable physics for our Flappy sprite. So for doing that, the function is game.physics.arcade.enable. and in the parameter pass the sprite for which you want to enable physics. So in this case I want to enable physics for the bird, which is actually stored in flappy. So inside this function I'm gonna pass the variable flappy. The reason why we enable physics for a game is because our sprite only has basic properties like .x, .y, .rotation, and it doesn't have advanced properties like .gravity, .velocity, .acceleration, etc. etc. So to use those advanced properties, we just have to enable physics for the sprite. Now to set gravity for our sprite, all we have to do is just write flappy dot body. To access all the physics properties, you have to use dot body. You can't simply say flappy dot gravity. It's because it's actually an advanced property that we got after enabling physics. So we have to write flappy dot body dot gravity dot y, since we only want the gravity in the y-axis, and equal to say 750. So now if we test our game, we can see that the bird actually falls down. And one more thing you have to note is that once you enable physics for a sprite, you should not access the coordinates of the sprite by flappy.x. You have to access it as flappy.body.x. Just keep that in mind. From now onwards, to access the coordinates of our flappy sprite, we'll be using flappy.body.whatever coordinate you want. So now our bird is falling down. The next thing we want to do is whenever we perform a left click or touch on the screen in case of mobile devices, we want our bird to jump. So this line of code tells the game that whenever the player performs a left click or touches on the screen in case of mobile devices, go ahead and call the function jump. We haven't created that function, and let's go ahead and create that function. First, put a comma after the update function and just use the same syntax. So now we have defined our function jump. So what's going to happen is that whenever we touch on the screen or perform a left click, this function is going to get called. That means the code that we write inside this function is going to get executed. So inside this function, we can write the code for making the bird jump. So to make the bird jump, all you have to do is just give velocity in the upwards direction. So for giving a velocity, write flappy dot body dot velocity dot y. Since we want to give the velocity in the up direction, we are going to make it minus and the value you want to give, and I'm going to give 350. So now if I test the game, okay, so when I perform a mouse click, the bird actually jumps up. So now the problem is that when the bird goes out of the stage, nothing actually happens. We want the game to restart and the bird goes out of the stage. So first let's go ahead and create a function for restarting the game. So whenever you're going to create a new function, you have to put a comma after the last function in the main state. So I'm going to name the function as restart game function. Now to restart the game, you can just use game.state.start and start the main state again. So now we have just created this function and we haven't called it anywhere. So we want to call this function if the bird goes out of the stage. To find that, inside the update function, write if flappy dot in world equal to false, then go ahead and restart the game by calling the restart game function. So this property dot in world will be true when the bird is on the stage. When the bird goes out of the stage, it becomes false. So by writing this statement, you're telling the game that if the dot in world becomes false, that is if the bird goes out of the stage, then go ahead and restart the game. So now if you test the game, you see that when the bird goes outside the stage, the game actually restarts. So now we have done with our bird. Let's go ahead and create pipes. So I'm gonna go over to paint and draw the pipes really quick. I'm just gonna draw a rectangle and make sure that the height is above 600 pixels. The height should be a really big value. I'll give it a green color and I'm going to name it as pipe.png. And save it into the assets folder of your game. So if you check the assets folder of your game, you'll see pipe.png. Now I'll just go ahead and load the pipe. Create the pipe and I'll store it in a variable called pipe. And finally, I'm going to enable physics for the pipe. I'm actually enabling physics for the pipe so that we can detect the collision between the bird and the pipe. Now if you test the game, you won't see the pipe on the stage because I actually created the pipe to the right of the stage, and when the game starts, the pipe should actually move towards the bird. If you look at the code, the x coordinate of the pipe is 500 and the width of the stage is only 400. So the pipe is actually created to the right of the stage, and that's the reason why you don't see pipe on the stage. So now let's go ahead and move the pipe towards the bird when the game starts. Just as I explained in the previous tutorials, to move the bird, all you have to do is just change its coordinate inside the update function. So pipe dot body dot x equal to pipe dot body dot x minus 2. The reason why we use body dot x instead of dot x is because we have enabled physics for the pipe. So now if we test the game, okay, we have an error over here. It was because I actually forgot to name this as pipe when I copied this. So now if you test the game, you can see that the pipe actually is moving towards the left. It's actually moving slowly because I'm running this screen recording software. Next problem is that when the bird collides with the pipe, nothing actually happens. We actually want the game to restart when the bird collides with the pipe. This function will make sure that whenever the bird and the pipe collides, the game will restart. The first three parameters of this function are important. The first two parameters are the sprites. I want to check the collision between the sprites, flappy and pipe. So the first two parameters are flappy and pipe. And the next parameter is which function should be called when these two sprites collide. Alright, so basically we are telling the game that when the sprites in the first and second parameter collide, go ahead and call the function in the third parameter. Or simply, if the flappy and pipe collides, then go ahead and call the function restart game, which will restart our game. So now if we test the game, you can see that when the flappy and the pipes collide, the game actually restarts. And the next problem is that only one pipe moves towards the bird, and after it goes towards the left of the stage, nothing else happens. So what I'm going to do is, once this pipe reaches the left of the stage, I'm going to reset its x coordinate to 500. So if you look at the code, the pipe was actually created in the x coordinate 500, and once it reaches the left side of the stage, I'm going to set its x coordinate back to 500. So to do that, I'm going to check if pipe dot body dot x plus pipe dot width lesser than 0, then reset the x coordinate of the pipe back to 500. So now if you test the game, you can see that once the pipe reaches the left side of stage, its x position is actually changed back to 500 and it just keeps coming back. This is because when the pipe reaches the leftmost end of the stage, its x coordinate becomes 0, and when it's completely out of the stage, its x coordinate plus its bit becomes less than 0. So that's how we detect when the pipe goes out of the stage, and if that happens, then we reset the x coordinate back to 500, which is the right side of the stage. Now when the pipe reaches the left side of stage, the only thing I'm doing is I'm just changing its x coordinate back to 500. The next thing I want to do is when the pipe reaches left side of stage, I also want to change its y coordinate randomly. So let's go ahead and do that. This piece of code is used for setting the y coordinate of the pipes randomly. Now before I explain this code, let me just go ahead and show you the result. As I said before, it's running slow because I'm running the screen recording software. Okay, so you can see that the y coordinate of the pipe also changed randomly. So now I'll go back and explain the code. So basically what this code is doing, this code randomly generates a number between 0 and 100, and if that number is even, then it will set the y coordinate to 150. If that number is odd, then it will set the y coordinate to 450 minus pipe dot height. The 150 is actually the default y coordinate of the pipe. When we created it here, we actually gave 150 as its y coordinate. Now in the second case, that is when the number is odd, I had set the y coordinate to 450 minus pipe dot height. This is because I want the bottom of the pipe to be at the coordinate 450. I don't want the top of the pipe to be at 450. In the first case, I actually wanted the top of the pipe to be at 150, so that's the reason why I gave 150 directly. And in this case, since I want the bottom of the pipe to be at 450, that's the reason why I gave minus pipe dot height. So you can see that in the first case, the top of the pipe is at 150, and in the second case, the bottom of the pipe is actually at 450. So now let's go ahead and create the score. So first I'm going to create a variable for storing the score of the game. Then I'm going to create a variable which will store the text that will display our score. Now in the create function, I will set the score to 0 and I'm gonna add a text for displaying a score. So this is actually the function for adding a text onto the stage, game.add.text. It has 4 parameters. The first 2 parameters are the x and y coordinates. The third parameter is what is to be displayed inside the text. So in this case, I want score plus what's inside this variable. And the fourth variable is actually the style of the text, like font. So here I made it 20 pixels and Arial. If you want, you can go ahead and change that to 18 pixels or 14 pixels. So now if we test the game, the text appears on the stage, but the score actually does not changes since we are not making any change to the score variable. So the logic to incrementing the score is that if the bird passes the pipe, the score gets incremented by 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a property to the pipe, which is pipe dot passed equal to, I'm going to set it as false. If the bird passes the pipe, then I'm going to set this variable as true. Alright, so this is one of the best thing about JavaScript. We actually have a lot of predefined properties, and we can also add new properties like this. So what I'm going to do is, inside the update function, if the bird passes the pipe and if the pipe dot passed is false, then increment the score and set the pipe dot passed to true. And this line of code, what it's doing is it's actually updating the text in our score.text variable, which is this. So it's going to set the text of score text to score plus what's in that score variable after incrementing it. The reason why we set pipe.passed to true is because if we don't do that, the score is gonna get incremented continuously. We don't want that to happen. We only want the score to get incremented once when the bird passes the pipe once. So when we set pipe.pass to true, this condition is not satisfied and the score only gets incremented once. And one more thing that you have to do when you're resetting the x and y coordinates of the pipe, also set the passed property back to false. So pipe.passed equal to false. So now if you test the game, so as you can see, the score actually worked perfect. So congrats, you just created your first HTML5 game which can be published on Android and iOS. And in the next tutorial, I'll show you how to publish this game on Android and iOS. And thanks a lot for the support you have been giving me. If you haven't already subscribed to my channel, then go ahead and subscribe to my channel and like the video if it was helpful. So I'll see you in the next tutorial.